Good people of Gradia, it's Monday!
Shut up, you stupid guard!
Just not the same as Tuesday, is it?
Oi, Gradia's different.
Well, I like the beaches and the women. Can't say I'm much for the reek of rotten fish around the dockside.
Well, lad, probably beats the smell of blood and ashes coming from Ledford right about now. And maybe some other parts of Ireland from what I hear.
What you hear? What do you mean? You know something about what's happened?
Lad, I'd have thought you'd figured out by now. I'm a bard, and it's my job to know something. And speaking of knowing things, maybe we can rouse the people here and earn a bit of coin with a recount of everything that's happened around Ledford so far.
This isn't gonna be like last time, is it? You know, with a story it's got a song, but a song is a story, and the story's a...
Boy, it's like I said before, don't overthink it. Now... Listen, all ye within the sound of my voice, and I'll tell ye a tale of wonder. A palpable parable of a peasant's penchant for poking his pointy ears into the politics of princes. A scintillating story of struggle, survival, and the sinister scheme of a slithering snake to seek a scenario to seize power. I tell ye now, a tawdry, tantalizing testament, this titanic and titular would be tough to transfer merely into text, for such words might tempt the truth. But luckily, you've got me. I tell ye now the tale of the fractured thrones. It was during the Fourth Age of Alzera, a time marked by the emergence of the Drow from the Underdark, and a time after the rise of a great conquering power in the east, known as the Theosian Empire. Our story begins in the humble border town of Ledford in the country of Ireland, an old human kingdom once marred by civil war, but unified by an aging ruler known as King Aelus. Life in Ledford was not easy in the slightest, and it was due to the decline of Ireland as a whole that Ledford was repeatedly beset by plague, famine, and a general unrest among the peasantry. Things weren't improved by Aelus's plan for Ledford, as he had dispatched his young and inexperienced son, Prince Gavus, to try to manage Ledford through these difficult times. It was due to these difficult times, on the advice of the prince's advisor Falgrith, an expedition was made into some recently uncovered crypts beneath Ledford to retrieve a chest of silver that was buried there, along with an amulet that the advisor said would greatly help Prince Gavus assure his right to rule when the proper time came. However, despite the successful expedition beneath Ledford to retrieve the silver, and despite fighting and narrowly escaping shambling fungal horrors in the dark, things in Ledford finally reached a boiling point. Unable to bear the hardships of the famine any longer, the folk of the town finally turned against the guard. This uprising was swiftly put down on orders by advisor Falgrith, and was carried out with brutal efficiency by the town's guard, thanks to the particular cruelty inflicted by one Sergeant Merrick. After the uprising was quelled, things in Ledford calmed down for the time being, if for no other reason than there were fewer mouths to feed. It was at this time that the Adventurers Guild would purchase land and open a branch in Ledford thanks to the philanthropy of a rather fat and happy noble from Adwick by the name of Lord Cornwall. But even with the coming of fresh silver and the opportunity of well-paying work into the town, it wouldn't stop the ambitions of Sergeant Merrick, as the nefarious sergeant used the opportunity presented by a bandit attack one evening to finally execute a mutinous plot against the older captain of the Ledford Guard, Captain William Rallard. The two men clashed in the courtyard of the keep, the ground still stained with the blood of both the peasant massacre and the bandit attack that had so recently occurred. The future of Ledford dangled in the balance between the two men, Merrick's tyranny or Rallard's mercy. Yet as fate would have it, and despite the odds overwhelmingly stacked against him, Rallard narrowly emerged victorious, and with it, the course of Ledford was forever altered, arguably for the better. King Aelus himself would later make an appearance in town to check on his son, and through whispers and rumors, there was talk of forces far greater at work than just a few guardsmen having a mutinous notion in the shadows of the castle. But that would have to wait, as a lingering illness had begun to take hold of the town, having been brought up from the depths by the first party to descend in the Ledford crypts. Called Shroom Lung, It was a terrible illness that history tells had plagued Ledford in ages past, but the information on how to cure Shroomlung had been long lost to time. Therefore, a party was sent on to Elry, a small nearby town where it was reported that a similar illness was taking hold, and furthermore, near a decrepit keep where rumors spoke of a man named Galdric, who may have found a cure so long ago. The Elry Keep would hold many secrets, and beneath the ruins there in the dark trod an insane, ancient warforged, a creature of antiquity who relentlessly followed a single final instruction: protect Master Galdric. Having almost met death in the dark there, the party was able to return to Ledford with the notes on Shroomlung. But Galdric's recipe for a cure also called for a particular set of ingredients, ones that could only be found in a dangerous swampy region called Mossley, just south of Ledford. With few options but to venture forth to collect the ingredients necessary for a cure, another party was dispatched, and through the tremendous efforts of those involved, narrowly managed to avoid a drowning death in the bog, infested with spiders and savage fish creatures. Despite the close brush with death, it was good that the effort was made, as upon the party's return, Shroomlung began to take hold of the town in earnest, and it wasted no time in felling any within whom it could infect. Thanks to the combined efforts of the town's more medically minded, a cure was devised and distributed, but it would be sorely in short supply, and while not everyone could be saved, the town was spared at least some of the wrath of the disease. Even so, the sickness had one final twist. The dead who had only recently fallen now rose again as twisted fungus folk and turned upon the living. The situation at Ledford quickly turned dire as the survivors struggled to resist this fresh attack from within. As luck would have it, however, a nearby Orlandi noble by the name of Lord Godfrey was close enough to respond to Ledford's distress, and despite the inner keep being breached, Ledford was able to survive thanks to the timely intervention of the warrior lord and his house troops. In light of the multiple attacks against Ledford, Lord Godfrey would go on to loan his house troops to Ledford for a time and oversee the creation of a town militia, along with ordering the construction of a palisade to protect the village structures outside the castle. Of course, whispers would still be uttered in dark places that such defensive action was not only in response to these happenings at Ledford, but that this marked the beginning of Ireland's preparation against forces far greater that moved just on the horizon. In darker corners still, more whispers would be had. Whispers of spiders and snakes, and of spies among the townsfolk. In hidden places, hidden hands began to move, and none could say to what ultimate end. Only that it would come to pass that more than one of Ledford's townsfolk found themselves ensnared in a web of lies and deceit, a web of politic and manipulation. Carefully they had to tread, for in the balance hung not only their own lives, but the lives of many around them, and perhaps the fate of things far, far greater than they could ever imagine. In the wake of such political machinations, Lord Godfrey would depart Ledford along with his men, although thanks to the patronage of Lord Cornwall, a small band of the Iron Wolves Mercenary Company did remain stationed at the Adventurers Guild and certainly made no bones about stirring up their own brand of trouble, even if they did offer some protection to the town simply with their presence. It was good they were there, too, as thanks to the large swath of the forest that had been cut down for the construction of the town's new palisade and fort, the very trees themselves would rebel against Ledford. The very forces of nature themselves beset the town out of vengeance for their fallen kin, from pricking thorns to mighty oaken tree men who would crush a man with a single swipe of their branches. Ledford was assaulted by all manner of fantastical creatures from the wood and the undergrowth. But just as you might believe that some things are impossible, the attack was undone by something even more fantastical. A dryad, who had come to live in the nearby woods of Ledford and commune with the townsfolk, emerged from the green to quell the wrath of the woods. Impossible, you say? A creature of legend, you think? A mere fantastical fable of fiction? No, it was real, it was all too real. And despite their shock and incredulity, all who were present witnessed it. Murmurs began in earnest now. Shroomlung might have been excused easily enough, for the corpses were long gone and all evidence burned. But this display defied all reason. It was magic. Somehow, some way, magic unlike that which had been seen in an age was creeping into the world. Slowly, magic was seeping from the legend of the past into the reality of the present, and it could no longer go unnoticed. Thankfully, once again for a time, it would seem that things would calm down in Ledford, if only for a moment. Still, the politics of the situation continued to churn. The situation in Ireland as a whole was not made better by the ubiquitous presence of bandits, and a particularly notorious group led by a man called the Cyclops would come to take residence in the nearby ruins of Stourling Keep, just outside of town. While not outright nefarious, the presence of such brigands who lived outside of the law did nothing but continue to stoke the current of unrest among the townsfolk, and rightfully so. For quietly in the night, disappearances began. Shouts of danger cut painfully short, and torches quenched. Amidst the darkness, monsters lurked on Ledford's edge. Some would say they were revenants of those who had risen from death to seek vengeance upon the living for a violent death. Others would say they were once simply elves, who had been driven to madness and forged into killing machines that felt no pain or fear. Yet surely such things were stories to frighten children. Well, no matter the tale, the growing number of butchered corpses would soon prove that they were very, very real, and it would take all of Ledford's vigilance to protect even the most inner parts of the castle from these insane creatures. But by the perseverance of Mithrax, Ledford endured the attacks of the terrifying creatures that would come to be known as the Servants of Ash. And amidst it all, just as before, whispers continued of both magic and the malevolent. Ancient powers were stirring in dark places, and powers not so ancient were stirring ever closer to the horizon. It was finally made clear and spoke of openly. The Theosian Empire was moving to invade Ireland, and while the folk of Ledford looked to one another for answers, a select group looked for their own answers in far darker and unlikely places. At great cost of life and limb, they found pieces to a puzzle they could hardly understand, deep within a mine at Gillimore, and even deeper underground beneath the orc-infested Badaria forest, tracing a path into the past as best they could to find a solution to the present. Somber days passed in Ledford as winter finally descended upon the realm, and hard choices were made in preparation for war. For some, Ledford, loyalty, and those they had come to love around them was all they knew, and so they would stake every drop of blood in their bodies on defending the lands upon which they stood. Yet for others, the decision was not so clear. The bond was not so strong. And honor was a thing for knights and lords, not practical men of means who wished for survival. Even so, despite the odds clearly stacked against them, it would come to pass that on pure principle alone, the town was able to parley with the bandits who inhabited Stourling Keep for an alliance of sorts, and the town of Ledford was bolstered with the ranks of the bandits, along with proper reinforcements with the northern castle of Lionhall. King Aelus planned to make the Imperials pay for every inch of soil, although once the Empire crossed the rocky terrain of the border, their notorious cavalry would have a clear advantage in the field. The final days were approaching Ledford with every step of the Empire's march, and despite heroic efforts on the part of the combined forces of Ireland at the border, it was clear that the Imperial vanguard, led by the dreaded Voltex Company and accompanied by an Elector Count himself, would be reaching Ledford for a full siege. And just as the gears of the Imperial war machine began to turn, the methodical might of the Empire bore down on every stone of Ledford, one brick at a time. Stourling was the first to fall, the presence of even a single Inquisitor enough to turn the tables and send Irelandy men scattering what might have been an otherwise far bloodier battle. Eyes then turned to Ledford proper, and the siege began in earnest. Trebuchets rained fire from the sky, setting alight men and material alike. Thunderous explosives breached the palisade no less than 3 times. Endless legions of golden soldiers poured forth from the wound left in Ledford's defenses. And despite even the intervention of strange and magical powers of nature made manifest into a raging incarnation of wrath that sought vengeance against the Imperials for their intrusion upon ancient and sacred places of the wood, it would not be enough. Devices of war unlike those in the West had ever seen before were brought to bear, and with their terrible roar, the very castle walls themselves were torn asunder. Men clad in shining plates of steel brandished fire and death from strange devices spoken of in fear and named Night Killers, for how easily they could dispatch even the most trained and armored of opponents. One by one, the plated soles of Imperial boots trod across Ledford's battlements. Inexorable, undeniable, and unstoppable in their singular mission to exterminate the entire populace and raise every hope, every dream, and every memory in the town to ashes. And they might have succeeded, were it not for one stubborn old man, wishing for nothing more than a warrior's death. Horns sounded in the distance behind the siege. King Aelus and the remainder of his men, haggard and battered though they may have been from the field, came to the defense of Ledford. King Aelus, the warrior king, the man who had unified Ireland in blood, prepared to give his blood one final time for the people he had spent a lifetime protecting. One final piercing war cry could be heard in the distance. And then, a lull. The golden-shod boots turned round. The fire pressed against Ledford in that moment turned away from the town and turned to face the king. And in that singular, briefest of moments, the faintest glimmer of hope lay. Not for victory, no, that was long gone. But hope to live, hope to survive, hope for Prince Gavus to escape, and with the slimmest of chances, hold the country of Ireland together. And so, the haggard survivors of Ledford descended into the very same crypts they had trod over a month earlier, down into the darkness below where strange ruins lay that had remained undisturbed for millennia. Desperately they ran through the strange horrors that resided there. Desperately they fought through the Imperials who lay in wait for them, and desperately they searched for clues to ancient mysteries to unlock powers which remained sealed from so very long ago. Well, who's to say what happened next, eh? Some say Prince Gavus escaped, accompanied only by his most trusted advisor and 2 Ledford elves who had become his agents, the prince leaving his people, and the 2 elves leaving their friends behind. Some say those foolish peasants who descended into the darkness below fought to their death against the horrors down there, never to be heard from again, and their bodies never to be found. Yet it's perhaps the truth that is stranger than any tale. And listen well to what I say. That a feat unlike any other was accomplished on that day. There in the bowels of Alzara, where even history goes to die, an accomplishment was achieved unlike that which has nay been attempted in this age or the last. I tell you the truth that on that day, magic truly found its way back into Alzara, and on the sacrifice of elves, of ancients, and of every single soul who raised their sword in that foul place, the veil was finally cracked, and a power made manifest that the minds of men can scarcely even comprehend. It was by way of this sacrifice that salvation was had for the people of Ledford, and they still survive to this day, somewhere. They say that the ages have turned now, that we're no longer in the 4th, but in the 5th. Many would point to the Imperial invasion, to the death of King Aelus, and to the ascension of Gavus to the throne, that these political events march the passing of one age to the next. But the truth, well, I suppose that's whatever you want to believe now, isn't it?
What a roll of horse shite! Cracking the veil, are you serious? This is on.
Come on, lad, let's go.
Oi, I mean, I ain't one to doubt you bardship, but, we weren't there for that last bit. Are you sure it happened that way?
Of course I'm sure. Just call it, bardic intuition. And that intuition is telling me right now that we should go this way.
Oh, all right. What's that way?
Ireland?
Ireland? We just came from...
Oh, lad. Like I've said before, when you're a bard, sometimes the stories come to you, and sometimes you gotta go to the stories. And besides, maybe we'll stop in Vernpolder. Maybe we'll keep going to Hayloth. Maybe we'll go to that other place. What's it called? Morrogorath. Ah, yes.